As promised, we're being joined on the line right now by Star Parker, president of CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Star, this is a great honor. I've been a huge fan of yours for a very long time. You've been an intellectual mentor for me, whether you know it or not. And welcome to the program.
Thank you. That is so kind of you. And especially as I age and watch my grandson, who is now 15 and in high school, I'm like, is there going to be anyone there? Are there voices coming up behind to keep conservatism alive in America? So I really appreciate that, young man.
No, absolutely. And so, I guess I want to start where I left off before I took the break. Star, I was talking about soon-to-be president Joe Biden. One of his first legislative policy agendas will be for the House to take up a vote to grant amnesty for 11 to 22 million illegal immigrants. It makes no political sense to me. It makes no sense other than if the goal is, which it is the Democratic Party's goal, to increase and expand their ranks. But this is immoral. At a time when you have millions of people out of a job, why put millions more people in their way that they'll have to actually compete with? But I'm not surprised by it. But we are. This is where we are.
It's being done to agitate the right. You're absolutely correct that there is no valid reason, politically even, to make this expansion. If you will, especially not right now where we're having other types of discussions, because there's no real guarantee that these newly found voters will then become Democrats. I mean, This is a harder work for Republicans and for conservatives to do. But keep in mind that Donald Trump increased the numbers of Latinos who voted for the right. A whole lot of people in ethnic communities are starting to understand what's really at stake in this country and what the real battle is. And so it's going to make it harder for conservatives to make their case in short windows, like 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. But I'm not going to see that they will automatically be Democrats. So to your question, oh, no, it's just to bother people so that we can start, dividing up again to say, okay, how deep is this agenda going to go against the right? And make no mistake, it will be against the right. This might be the first thing they're doing, but the second will be all about race rhetoric to further divide the society so that then the left can pretend that censorship is a good idea.
Zara, I opened the program just sort of speaking off the top of my head and from my heart about the country that I love. This country. I recognize its checkered past, but I'm also sort of proud of that too. Where we came from as a country, the war that we fought to address the problem of slavery and the racial harmony that the place that we've come to. And about a couple hours in the show, I realized, Star, as I continued to talk and I continued to take calls, I think the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be canceled today because him just calling and passionately pleading that his children grow up in an American society where they be judged by the character, the content of their character, not the color of their skin, is absolutely the opposite of what so many organs, powerful political operations, the tech oligarchy, Hollywood and entertainment, which I cover at Breitbart News, they're all calling for a society whereby we make decisions, wholesale decisions based on the color of people's skin. What's your view on it? You have a very interesting life story. And I'd like for you to get as personal as you want, but where are we in today? I mean, what does Martin Luther King's legacy mean to you in light of everything that the left is shoving down our throat?
Well, we are seeing a lot of revisionist history when it comes to the legacy of Dr. King, and frankly, he lived a very patchwork life himself.
Yeah.
And while he led a great movement to say, remove these governmental barriers so that black people who had a legacy and history in slavery can live free. I mean, that was his appeal. These barriers over education and economic aspirations need to be removed so that people can then make choice. Now, whether he would have continued in that particular line of thought, we don't know. I mean, toward his history and in his history, we saw him putting himself in both sides of the political spectrums and worldviews, whether it was we want to be biblical and free or whether we want to be secular and statist. But that said, there's no question that his legacy has been actually hijacked by the left, and we have a whole lot of now what's called fake news running through what he was really wanting to do. Keep in mind that wonderful I Have a Dream speech that you're referring to had three parts. The first part, he spoke to the nation. He said, you've given us a check that's no good. He did not try to overturn the country. He did not try to transform the country. He did not think that the founding fathers were a bunch of racists and that they were flawed in the concept of America. In fact, he appealed to those founding fathers and those founding principles to say, let's include these descendants of the 4 million former slaves. So we know that. So the first part of his speech, he spoke to the country. The second part of his speech, he spoke to what was then called the Negro. Now, you're right, he might be canceled today for using that term, but let's look at what he said. He told him, look, the work is done. So let's go back into our communities and build. He even named some communities to go back into. He didn't say pick up the political power of Washington and now let's force a system of revenge against the society. He said let's go and incorporate ourselves into the mainstream of America so that we can live free. That is one of the things that he said that he wanted. And then the third part, of course, he spoke to people of like faith with him, the Christian, to say, can we work together? Can the two black and whites that have been segregated and separated so long here in the South couldn't even go to church or worship together? Can we integrate? But I don't know that he called for forced integration. He called for desegregation, no question. But this forced integration and this picking up a baton of critical race theory and affirmative action and all of this multicultural diversity stuff that now has infiltrated every institution, I'm just not sure that he would approve of where we are today.
We're being joined right now by Star Parker, author and founder and president of Cure. Less than 2 years after the Reverend gave that speech, soon to be Senator Patrick Moynihan, he shepherded and spoke out about the Negro Report, and at that time there were about 1 in 4 black children being raised in single family homes. Today that number is hovered over 70% in the intervening decades. And I talked, Star, at the beginning of the show about how all of the money in the world, all of the political energy in the world, there is no law, there's no bill that could be signed into law that could actually fill the hole that has existed in the black family now for 2 generations. You'll never actually be able to solve the problem. You can throw, phrases like white privilege at it, all you want. You can give all the speeches, and there have been so many political scientists and people. There's no shortage of experts, if you will, and politicians who have danced around this problem. But those children, we've known it because the data has been staring us in the face and telling us that they're more likely to grow up in poverty, that they're more likely to be stuck in shoddy schools, and that those young girls are more likely to become teenage mothers themselves. I'm saddened that today you won't actually hear more people talking about the root cause of the poverty where it exists. Not racism, but a pattern of behavior that still sadly exists. It has gotten better, but how do we reorient the conversation, Star, to that we get to that part of it?
Well, it's an interesting question as well, because as much as President Trump is under attack, he actually did a lot of deliberate efforts for us to focus attention on these zip codes that are now steeped in poverty, because we've concentrated poverty over the last 60 years, the reference you're making to the Great Society and the welfare state expansions. He outlined and showed us that there are 8,700 zip codes. We went in and through some of the tax relief and other things that his economic team were doing and found those zip codes, and now money was able to flow to those zip codes in terms of private sector money, capital gain money that would go somewhere else to escape a capital gain tax, was now able to go into these 8,700 zip codes that are entrenched in poverty. But what to your specific point, you're absolutely correct. When Daniel Patrick Moynihan spoke about the challenge of expanding the welfare society, he looked at the black families, particularly. He was a head of the Department of Labor at the time, and he prophetically said that this will collapse the family, and it did. It absolutely did. It turned things around to where the nanny state became the dad in the household, and it has had a horrible impact. I talk about it in my second book, Uncle Sam's Plantation, to extent, because it's had a horrible impact on how young boys visit their lives and how young girls visit their lives with the absence of a dad who's married to the mom. That trend, we hope, will be next, since now we're starting to see economic trends change in black communities and in our poor communities because of the economic policies of Donald Trump. We're starting to see some real gains when it comes to economic empowerment, wealth. I mean, this last census was very, very encouraging. And that showed that now we have more black households that make $75,000 and above than black households that make $25,000 and under. So this is healthy. We've known for quite some time that although all of the loud rhetoric of the political left that tries to racially divide us is that most blacks are poor, we've known for a long time that that's not true. Only 1 in 5 blacks are poor. Right. But when you start looking now about the wealth that's being developed in the black community, because once you have access to income, you now can begin to save and invest and start to build your economic net worth. This is a good place. Unfortunately, the Biden-Harris administration will probably try to undermine a lot of these gains, but I'm not sure if they can put that genie back in the box. Because once people have a little bit of stability in their pocket, they're not living paycheck to paycheck, then they start to make better choices in their lives. So we could maybe even attack this problem of men not marrying the mother of their children.
I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. Joe Biden, he tweeted last January, "Let me be clear, transgender equality is the civil rights issue of our time." I'm only assuming, but I think you would disagree with that statement. I think it's incumbent upon Republicans and conservative activists, people who are really in the fight for expanding freedom and liberty and opportunity, to push back on a lot of this stuff. I think, if anything, it's probably educational opportunity in terms of giving parents whose children are stuck in bad school systems the opportunity to get out of those bad situations. I think it's pushing back on this effort to defund the police that we're now seeing coming from tech oligarchs and political leftists and Democrats. This type of stuff is not being prioritized by the left, and it never will be. These types of conversations. But do you agree there that that's the way forward for conservatives?
Well, we have to then build structures, and I appreciate Breitbart and others that are now coming up to keep to keep our voice in the public square, because what we're seeing now with censorship, it might be almost impossible to get a wide mainstream voice of the opposition against what the Biden Harris administration has in mind, in particular on these LGBTQ questions. You're absolutely right about the T. You know, what's fascinating is that you think about what the founders were able to do to bring those 3 C's together: Christianity, capitalism, and a constitution, so that people can live free, and to stabilize a society and civilize that society. And now we're back to the days of eunuchs. You know, whether you want to be one or not, we're at the place where, you know, this is what the trans community is asking for. We don't like what we have been birthed with, so we're going to make realities and personal decisions to change, and not just personal decisions. As the scripture says, some are forced to do it. And so we do have parents that now are forcing their children to change their gender because they feel that they have been birthed into the wrong body. So, yes, these discussions are going to take place. And a lot of the place that we have to look as conservatives to have this concession are in the rules changes in the various departments and agencies. We do have to focus there. That's where the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, the group that I'm the president is going next. You know, it's almost like an underground movement to get into the details of what they're doing inside of these agencies and departments, what they're doing with the different acts that they pass and the commissions that they develop, so that we can start peeling away from this worldview that is inconsistent with the founding of our country, to where people need barriers removed so they can live free, so that there are consequences with the decisions that they make, so that their sin doesn't affect their neighbor. I mean, that's the reality of America. Personal responsibility is difficult, but in order to be responsible for your choices, you have to have choices, which is what you're alluded to about, school choices, housing choices, removing all of this big government that now has pushed itself into every aspect of our lives, to where we're even fighting over whether somebody is having difficulty in what they want to do sexually. At the end of the day, all sexual matters are adult matters. They should be private, not forced to discuss with kindergartners.
Star Parker, thank you so much for joining the program.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, and you have a wonderful King Day off, but we're not off.
No, never.
Bureaucrats are off today. and our military's not off either, because they're on every corner in Washington, D.C., so we want to salute them, but we also want to discourage a totalitarian police state at the same time. So.
Absolutely. God bless you, Star. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.